I'm super excited for this virtual roundtable of friends and family here, of folks that are organizing around the People's Budget campaign and pushing to defund, oh no, I forget, that's mirror, defund the police and defund LBPD. So thanks for all of you who are tuning in and watching us across social media or sharing this with your different networks and other folks as well. It's really great to see that there's interest in these conversations right now and in this super pivotal moment within the context of the city budget. So I appreciate folks tuning in to talk to us and listen in about the People's Budget campaign. For those of you who are not familiar with the People's Budget Long Beach, this is a campaign that's really about bringing equity and justice and fairness to the city budget. And in this national movement that we're in, really about centering Black lives and how are we looking at really restoring our city budget to be one that's driven by the people for the people. So a couple weeks ago, probably about a month ago already, y'all, I'm losing my sense of time. So I'm gonna ask the awesome folks here at this roundtable to help me out. But we are a coalition of groups that released the People's Budget proposal, including Black Lives Matter Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition, Long Beach Residents Empowered, a number of other folks that I'm missing right now. But we released a proposal to actually say, this is what it means to defund LBPD and actually reinvest those dollars in Black and Brown communities. And so there's been a lot going on in the campaign, and as many of you are probably familiar with the People's Budget. We're having this conversation today because this past Monday, City Manager Tom Modica and Mayor Robert Garcia released their budget proposals to the public and to the City Council. And so this is a really big moment in the budget cycle and within the timeframe of the public budgeting process in Long Beach. So we are here today to chop up and spill the tea about the budget proposals, talk about and breaking all these things down. There's a lot of folks who've been reaching out saying like, yo, I ain't got time to read 146 pages, but like, and this stuff is confusing, right? And one of the things we talk about in our campaign a lot is that this budget process is confusing and difficult to follow by design, right? And so I really want to underscore that, and we're here to talk about it and then also talk about defunding LBPD and the People's Budget. So with that, I want to introduce the folks who are here on our virtual roundtable. For those of you who don't know me, my name is James, pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm with Long Beach Forward and the People's Budget Campaign, and I will throw it over to Dawn.
Good, it's afternoon already. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Dawn with BLM Long Beach and just a mama of Black boys and a native of Long Beach and concerned about these processes. So, yeah.
Sweet. How about Kim?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Kim, also part of BLM Long Beach. Previously, I worked at Cal State Long Beach for about 10 years, and now I currently work at USC in the Dornsife Equity Research Institute. Happy to be part of this conversation about the budget and really how we are best centering Black residents in particular and all the other communities in Long Beach. Thanks for being here. Beto?
Hello, everybody. I'm really happy and excited to be here. Beto with Libre. Nonetheless, always honored to work with Kim and Dawn and Gabby and James. And, I think it's time, and it's been a calling for a long time, right? Defunding the police. It's time that, we change the way that our communities are protected, because we can protect ourselves as well. And I think that we do a better job, right? We don't run the risk of getting killed by one another. So at the end of the day, we're here to really lift up the voices of the unheard. And they're not unheard because they don't want to be heard. It's just because politicians decide to listen to other people with private interests. And so that's why I'm really excited to be here, and it's time to spill the beans and, let's talk. Gabby?
Hi, folks. Super excited to be here and sharing space with all of you and everyone that's tuning in. My name is Gabby Hernandez. I'm the Associate Director for the Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition. We're part of the People's Budget Campaign. And I'm excited to talk about all of these different things that we're learning along the way with you all. And I do want to acknowledge that none of this would be possible, not even this conversation, if it wasn't for the BLM movement. So really want to thank BLM folks from Long Beach being here because none of this conversation, even the proposed budget, wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for this movement.
Yes. All right. So without further ado, let's chop it up. Let's spill the tea. Let's get into it. I want to hear y'all's thoughts on and perspectives on the city manager and mayor's budget proposals that came out. And the one thing I want to add too for folks who are wondering why, or if you're new to understanding the city and some of these power structures, so the city manager is the one who actually, really supervises the entire city, all these departments, and puts some recommendations together. And then on top of that, the mayor also has his own budget recommendations that he sends to city council. So there are some differences in there. There are things that the mayor is proposing that the city manager has not, some differences of opinion. And so this is all up to the city council to now debate and figure out. But I want to hear, what are y'all thoughts? What's your take on it? And where are we at? Who wants to go first?
I'm thinking about it. I don't know that I want to though. I'll hold off for a minute. And just so folks know, I will say this. We're in this moment of Black freedom struggle. Also, we're in a budget cycle in our city at the same time. We're also this is Black August. There is deep historical context around this month of resistance. And we're in this conversation and in this moment because of state violence and because of that violence, how it shows up both indirectly and in our communities and directly by the hands of the state, who are the police. So we're having this conversation because of police violence. I hope that our friends, if I'm looking down a little bit, Tyler Woods, if I want to invite folks to say his name, Tyler Woods.
Tyler Woods.
Tyler Woods.
His mother, Tyra, is present. She was with us yesterday at a brief press conference that we had at City Hall, and we're hoping she'll be able to hop on with us a little bit today. But it's Tyler Woods is why we're here. It's Dante Jordan is why we're here. It's those who right here in Long Beach, not just in Minneapolis and just in Georgia, where Ahmaud Arbery was killed by a white supremacist, but here in Long Beach, those murdered by LBPD. And so the long time fight around accountability on this police department and accountability on this city to hold that department accountable is why we're here. And the height of this uprising is out of frustration for that non-accountability and lack of accountability, the violence with impunity. We're saying, you know what, shift that power from police to the people. And if that means we have to hit them in their pocket, in the words of defund, and or divest and reinvest these resources, and specifically the work that police have, that they do in ways that have integrated themselves in our everyday lives and civilian everyday life, the quality of work or quality of life work that they claim under the police department, that is work that doesn't belong to them. Tending to homelessness, tending to mental health, when we have our own mental health department, those are the kinds of work that belong to our mental health professionals, that belong to our community psychologists, that belong to our behavioral specialists, right? So if we're looking at hiring civilians to do that work, it's those professionals who that work belongs to, not individuals who are militarized and trained to kill, right? So this idea, I know we're going to get into the numbers in a moment, but this idea that the police are saying, or that the city is saying, okay, we'll divest in these ways, we're going to cut this number of police, and then we're going to hire these civilians to do this priority 3 level, AKA nonviolent work, is not what you heard in these focus groups during this reconciliation process. It's not what you're hearing from the community over these 6 years. So I think that's a wrong answer. So I'll open a little bit with that.
So I'll follow up with a short comment, as most studious comment that I could think of. It's bullshit. Complete and utter disrespectful disregard for the Black community. The city is showing very, very little, so many thoughts running through my mind. But at the end of the day, different departments were asked to cut their budget by a certain percent, and the police were not asked to cut their budget by that percent, right? And that actually their cut is much less than all the cities together. And so, the budget numbers is not our expertise at BLM. Our expertise is really, disrupting all the nonsense that's happening, and the fact that, police officers are still working, even the ones that shot and killed Tyler Woods, right? They're still working, they're still in those positions, they're still causing more harm. There's still contracts with social services, they're still doing predictive policing and surveilling. Even when we're walking down the street protesting, there are ways in which they can surveil us. And so they're not building a relationship with the city, they're not building a relationship with the residents in the city. And putting out a budget where over 40% is still going to the police is telling us that they're not really listening, and folks are going to be encouraged to come back out into the streets, because we need some real, live, tangible action. And I know that we are in a crisis. As the mayor mentioned, COVID is the #1 killer right now of people in Long Beach, which is really, really sad. And again, my condolences even to the mayor's mom, who recently passed away. And even with that, people are willing to risk their lives and go out there and say, no, enough is enough, right? You've got the school board meeting later today that is only taking in-person comments, right? That's a slap in the face. So we should risk our lives to go in and complain about something rather than giving us the choice to make a phone call and call in or send an email in. So many of the things that the city are doing, some of them actually are not legal, right? Because you're kind of, there are ADA laws for that. And so coming back to the budget, I know I want to leave that expertise of crunching the numbers to you all, because I know you all have been in the people's budget work for over 5 years, and just really, really thankful for you all that keep coming to this place of letting us know what will work, right? There are methodologies that do work, and so let's lean into that. So I encourage the city folks that are listening to just come back to the table and say, no, this is not sufficient, and here are some actual numbers and how to do a rewrite. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kim and Don. And I think the city's failing to understand, like they say it with words that this is a crisis, that racism is a crisis, but they're not taking it seriously as it should be, right? I think what we're seeing right now in the people's budget, like I guess one point that I want folks to really understand is that like what we're asking for in the people's budget are basic things that we're like fighting really hard to get, and that we're getting pushback, right? That these are not like, we're not asking for like a ridiculous request. These are like simple things that our community requires and that they deserve, right? Like for us, this is not about like going against the city and like having like this arguments for the sake of not getting to anywhere, right? I think it's our community's lives are on the line, right? Like I can tell you that as of last week, somebody was detained by ICE here in Long Beach, right? Like these things are still happening. And when we talk about our communities and our communities' needs, the people's budget is where it's at, right? And when we see the mayor coming out with the proposed budget, don't get me wrong, there were a few things from the people's budget that were included on there, right? But again, it's pennies, right? When our community is needing way more than that, when they're like really struggling right now, right? I think there's a difference in realities. And that's so evident as we see this budget being released, right? That the reality is not the reality of our communities, right? The reality of a community member that is struggling to pay a rent that they can't even afford at this time, right? And that the city hasn't even done anything to support community members, right? Like they have a lottery rental assistance that like community members can't even access, right? Because they're asking for a number of different documents that are really not even accessible to community. So I guess I just want to bring out the point that that what is being proposed is really not reflective of the community that lives in Long Beach and the community needs that exist. So I think there's a lot of reflection that needs to go on, and really not seen as like the enemies, but really people that we're saying, you know, we can work with you, but you need to be able to work with us, right? And not just mask numbers or put something out there and expect us to be happy. I think it's like really paying attention to uh, to the community and the needs that are being asked.
I'll be short and brief on my end. You know, I just want to point out that it's almost as if they think that we don't know what they're doing. All right. But like, you know, people in the past fought for us to get an education and open up the doors for us to access education when they were, you know, when we were barred and, you know, not allowed to get an education. And now that we've been fought for and now we're continuing the fight, we know what's going on. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're highlighting the truth. And that's why we're speaking the truth, because we are the people that are actually down on the ground working with the people. Why do I say that? It's like the city gets calls from their community residents, and what do? They refer them out to us, the community organizations, that then have to do the work for the city, and yet we don't receive city money. But we're doing their work because they have no enforcement mechanisms and they don't want to do the work. If they're serious about doing the work, then they will put money into what we're asking for. And like Gabby said, our demands, right? They're just basic necessities that people can have. The definition of public safety is very different from our end to their end. They think public safety is someone with a gun. For us, it's housing, healthcare, language access, and defunding the police is a time, like now is a time to do that. And I think that now more than ever, you know, and sadly, you know, people had to die in order for this to happen. Sadly, that, like, we don't even have an accurate number how many people have died at the hands of police, because there's also cover-ups. They'll say that something else happened, but yeah, even though like we come out and say it all the time, they still want to play a deaf ear. But now more than ever, I think we're getting louder, and I think the time is now, and I think it's actually going to happen. And the proposed city staff furloughs exclude, you know, public safety, and then 10% of reductions are non-sworn staff only as well. So, you know, we're not where we were in the past. We're now in the future, and we're out here fighting, and we're now more than ever going to expose the truth. And we're really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be here on this call today.
Okay, one, y'all are so cool. Just putting that out there. I loved hearing all of that. And you know, two, like just as y'all were saying, like this budget, proposed budgets that we're seeing, they don't defund the police. We can talk about the 10 million cut that the Press Telegram and the Long Beach Post are reporting and that we're hearing from officials, but when the adopted budget from the general fund alone for the police last year was over $243 million, what's a $10 million cut to that, right? That's I mean, I think you all said it better. That's just kind of insulting. And so, you know, I was looking at the chats too while y'all were sharing, and people are giving life to us on Facebook. And someone pointed out the POA response, right? Like it's a given, the eye roll, right? It's a given that the Police Officers Association is not going to be happy with any kind of cut of any level, right? And, you know, I think this is important for us to call out the fear-mongering tactics that are not okay, that will bully people, right? And we've seen the POA do this before. But to say that even, you know, being able to civilianize certain positions, which, you know, we're also like, that's nothing, right? For them to say that that's going to create more fear in the community and use fear. And, you know, I'll say, you know, these very kind of similar tactics we see from the federal administration doesn't work, right? We don't buy that. The community is smarter than that. Our people are smarter than that. You know, the businesses tried to do this in Measure N as well. The hospitality industry tried to say if we give hotel workers living wages, then our entire tourism economy is going to tank. And the complete opposite was true. So this is not, you know, I think our people are small, and it's ancient tactics. Thank you. And so, you know, I think that needs to be said as well.
And another reality is that for the most part, some of our communities don't even call police, right? When something's going down, when something's happening, because we know what the consequences may be. So for them to come out and say like, hey, because if you're asking to defund police, that means there's going to be more terror out there. Actually, I think it's the opposite, right? As we see more police officers, that's when the terror really begins. Our communities don't necessarily call 911 or the cops, right? When things are going down. And that's a reality.
also response times, right? They're claiming that if the cuts happen, they're gonna like have longer response times. Well, that's already happening to our communities. Communities of color get longer response times compared to the white communities. So that's already happening. We don't need, the defunding the police ain't gonna make that happen. Maybe it'll happen to the white neighborhoods, and then they'll maybe start doing different things. But it's like already happening to our communities. If like a person of color, or let's say in the lower income quote unquote districts, they call the cops, they get a longer response time. And so that's already true. Like our people have said that already. It's like that's why we don't even call the police. All right. Sometimes they even call us for answers because they think that we might be able to help them. And in the world that in the work that I do, it's housing. People are scared to call the cops because they know the cops will side with the landlords. What are cops meant to do is protect private property. What is a rental unit? Private property. So who are they going to side with? The landlord. So then we have to go in there and try to help out the tenant. And not only are we fighting the landlord, but we're also fighting the systems that enforce these harsh realities on our people.
And I have to say, y'all, like I'm a book nerd, so like my heart hurt, like even just thinking about like the library department in the city already gets like dismal funding, and to see in these proposals talking about reducing and closing library branches, right, when like the fact that our libraries, even pre like in quote unquote good times, post before when places were a thing, before COVID, right, weren't open on Mondays, weren't open before noon, limited hours on the weekends, like, and the fact that like being able to give just an additional 100,000, even like just even 10,000 to the libraries seems so unheard of. Again, while $240 million the police department is just, what do we think is going to happen in our community and our society when that happens, right? So I just had to say that. Really
well, the other piece to that, James, I think you made a good point about the libraries. I don't think people see the full picture of that, right? Because the trickle down effect of that is that folks aren't able to go to the libraries to use the internet, right? They may not have Wi-Fi at home. A lot of Black homes don't. And so you've got so many other things happening when the libraries are closed. It's not just you can't get books, but you have no place to go and connect to the internet, to maybe apply for jobs, send out your resume, maybe pay your bills online. And so people look to going to the library for more things other than just getting books out. And I think, really it's something that our city should really be ashamed of, to on the one hand talk about we want to fight the digital divide, and on the other hand doing things like this that is the opposite of fighting the digital divide, right? So yeah, there are a lot of side effects to the one thing that they're doing, which is not funding the libraries, for example.
Yeah, that's great.
Another point that I was just thinking about as I heard you speak, Kim, is that it does have ripple effects, right? Like we know a lot of houseless folks that's where they can go to cool off, right? When it's super, super hot. And that won't be available. Like that's another reality, right? Which is, I think I have to go back to like, it's not their reality, whoever's proposing this. So they don't even think about this, right? But that's something like small, but huge. Like a person that doesn't have a home, that needs a place to go to the bathroom or just cool down, they can't even access that, right? So it has more than, it has way more ripple effects.
Yeah. I tweeted this yesterday, listening to the budget hearing, which is like the first budget hearing last night, which I'm sure we'll get into, because that was the whole thing. But I really wish we were not furloughing city staff and like permanently furloughing police. So, I think that's another reality that and a problem I see with this proposed budget. But I want to get into, kind of expanding on this and hear from you all too, like what does defunding LBPD and reinvesting those dollars mean? And like tangibly, what is that looking like? And I think the people's budget, what we've been organizing and talking to folks to and building with community is a really solid, tangible piece of that. So I'd love to hear from you all about that.
Yeah, I'll touch on it just a little bit. I did already, I think in the beginning, like the divestment, just naming the work that they do. I think specifically about the gang, these gang units, vice units, whatever they're called. They have a whole, unit dedicated to youth related work. the quality of life unit, and I'm using this word unit because I don't know if it's what the other word they may call it, but I'm going to say unit. Quality of life work, the Met teams, right? Like I don't understand how they divested from fire, the fire department. They took the heart teams, right? There are 3 heart teams across the city. The heart teams are teams of other medical related and trauma informed experts who go out with fire to tend to lower level incidents. And they divested from fire basically by removing the heart teams out from under fire. And I think they're now in the health department. And so how is it that they can do that? But the Met teams, right? The teams who respond to the mental health needs, Faraz Murad, for example, right? Everyone remembers, I hope, Faraz, and say his name, Faraz Murad.
Faraz Murad.
Yes, right, Cal State Long Beach student, hanging out with some friends, smoking, tried some other recreational drug and had a bad experience and threw himself out of a 2-story window and in need of help. Folks, hear the commotion, call, I assume 911. I don't know exactly what, I think 911, his sister said she heard the 911 call. Fire department comes and they're easing him and, de-escalating the situation, calming him. And in that moment, here comes Long Beach PD, guns a-blazing. And with his gun out, Officer Hernandez kills Faraz. Just as the fire was getting him to sit down, Faraz pops up, it sounds like out of fear and angst with the way that the police rolled up, and they see him pop up and kill him. And so I don't understand how the Met teams, you have, there are at least 50 officers that I know of who have killed people. At least about 45 of them or so are still working, making lots of money, have been awarded, have been rewarded, have gotten promotions, who have not been held accountable, have past records, the officers who killed Tyler Woods, again, I wish, I think his mom was having some technical stuff going on, but I wish she could be telling you this herself. One of the officers who murdered her son hunted him down, chased after him, calling him the N-word, as documented in his court case by witnesses, a Latina woman who witnessed this. And so I just realized I just hopped 3 topics. But the Met teams are, under the police, they can defund fire and take out the heart teams. But the Met teams that belong to the health department, I guess it's difficult to do when we have a city who has only been funding our health department $3 million, right? When they have programs and services that our community needs, but have no resources to be able to communicate what those programs are that are really supportive and helpful in our community. So, it looks like moving that work back to the professionals in our health department who are trained and resource them so that they're better equipped. And, that's what the divestment is. It's a shift of, let me tell you, here's one other point. Crossing guards. I saw it. Great, way to go, LBPD. You cut the budget by taking crossing guards out from under the police. You get it. I think they get it because they did it, right? Can we give them a round of applause? Right? They defunded the department, right? By shifting work that doesn't belong to them, like crossing guards. Why is it under the police department anyway? Oh, because they want to police everything like crossing guard, people walking across the street, and put it in public works. They just did it, Long Beach, right? Yeah. And they need to do it better and for real and stop playing around, right? You get it. Stop using the fear money. Yeah, so yeah, I was about to get excited. I'm gonna let it go.
No, but I think that's a really solid point, Don, that you're highlighting that I think is really vital for people to understand. I want to bring this up because you and I were doing a lot of this stuff too. How long, remember the airport deal, right? There was the effort Yeah, there was an
Security workers at the airport. I think they
yeah,
belong to a union with IAM.
correct. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, there was this effort for folks who don't realize. You could Google, or I'm sure somebody watching, I won't be surprised if there's someone from IAM watching right now. Drop a link from the news coverage. But if Long Beach Airport, LBPD, there was a multi-year effort that started under Bob Foster, right, to really to bring in an LBPD presence and have officers trained to shoot and kill, right, at our Long Beach Airport. And we were able to actually stop that at city council. And there, police chief was really pissed off about it. We saw a lot of that, right? But I think to your point, like there's been this effort for, decades of the police department, LBPD, trying to get their reach into every fabric of our community and our society, right? And I think now in this budget, people are starting to understand how deep and pervasive that is, right? Crossing guards, right? Why, right? And so I appreciate you bringing that up, because I just wanted to point that out, that this is what we talk about when we say systemic stuff, right?
Yeah, I also want to go back to the point that Don made about the 3 million going to the health department. Just like, let's think about that, 3 million. Now I'm about to tell you the police department's budget. It's 243 million. See the comparison there? Like the health department is only getting 3 million and the police is getting 243 million and change, right? There's more than that. Like that is just like wild to even think about that. Like and Beto mentioned this, right? What is public safety and how are they defining that, right? It's mind-blowing to me that even as they do this this very small cut to the city, to the police department, they're not really removing those police officers, right? Like they're not going to be wearing the badge and their uniform, but they're being transferred to doing another job, like a civilian, right, quote unquote job. But they're still employed, like they're still under the police department. So that still hasn't changed. They're just going to have different jobs. And I think I have to go back to the original point that I guess we're asking again for basic things. And I'm also realizing that we need way more time to discuss all of this and break all this down because there's just so much. But like just the prime example, right? Yesterday, city council, like we had to fight to get that city council to be interpreted. Since March of this year, those meetings were not in any other language but in English. They just like thought, like, again, not the reality. They didn't have to think about it. And it was not even on the radar, right? And like we had to fight for that to happen. We made it happen. Community called, right? Community like really like showed up and was making calls to make sure that that happened. But then they were really disappointed yesterday. Like the interpretation was horrific, right? And they keep hiring vendors that we know are not doing the right job. Like we keep telling them this is not like they've never heard it before, right? Like we've told them, community has told them, like this is happening again and again and again. And they're like, no, we are investing in language access. Are you really changing and shifting the culture in the city? I don't think so, right? I mean, for the people's budget, specifically the language access piece, we're asking to hire in-house interpreters, for them to have interpreters in-house that speak Tagalog, that speak Spanish, that speak Khmer, and that can provide that vital information, especially now with COVID times, right? Like the information that the city is providing is like vital. Like people need to know this information. People need to know what's being discussed at city council. Like these are all like critical things that communities should be aware of. So we're asking for 2 million, 2.3 million to fully fund and implement the language access policy. That's less than 1% of the police budget. Yeah, just less than 1%. Just like let that sink in, right? Like we're not asking, like again, the police budget is 243 million. We're asking for less than a percent, right? And again, going back to the additional piece of like folks facing deportation, right? Like immigrant folks are not only having to worry about COVID-19, which they're already scared of getting tested, right? Because there's so many other things that are being put by the federal administration, like public charge, right? Where people are scared and they're not for the most part possibly going to get tested. But like COVID-19 is not only the only thing that's on their mind, right? It's also like housing, right? It's also language access. It's also, what if I get deported? Like, what am I gonna do? You know, I don't have a safety net. I don't even have money to pay my 3 months of rent that I haven't paid because I haven't had a job, right? So people really need to have access to legal representation when they're facing deportation. So we're asking again for pennies to make sure that the Justice Fund gets refunded and that Long Beach families get to stay together, right? That there is no separation. It's not just writing a tweet about it or a statement, like really be about it, right? And refund this, renew this, make it structural so we don't have to go back to city council and fight for this again and again and again. Like make this something that is there because you care, right? Like city of Long Beach is always thinking like, oh, it's always like saying we're diverse, you know, like we're the most diverse city in California. Then own it and really represent folks and really show up for people, like legal rep, language access, right? Investing in Black communities. Like this is like not rocket science, right? Like this is really simple stuff. And I really hope that the city understands this and that they really like get it, you know, and that they adopt the people's budget in full.
Y'all get me like worked up. I'm like sweating. You can't tell because the lighting and all that, but I'm getting whoo. But yeah, Beto, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Well, I mean, for me, like I'm gonna focus on the housing. There's just a lot that happens, right? As someone who is a person of color, right, who has faced times, right, walking down the street and getting pulled over for no reason because I matched the description. Being an immigrant, right, being pulled over by cops, and then next thing you know, you're being worried about getting deported, even though you haven't done anything wrong. So there's a lot I can touch on, but right now I'm gonna focus on housing because of this is like just a necessity, right, of what it is. Statistics show, right, there was a study done 2016 that says, Black women are the most rent burden. Also, when we look at the Black population in Long Beach, 13%. How do we make that population grow in Long Beach and make Long Beach a true diverse city? Are we going to wait till that percentage goes lower to then try to make changes? By then, it's going to be too late. In what was it, 2015, students at Cal State Long Beach fought and helped increase the Black enrollment at Cal State Long Beach. And that happened through direct action and through advocacy. And that's what we're once again doing. So what we need is affordable housing. The city has lacked in funding affordable housing and keeping residents home. Right? They have allowed this wave of gentrification to kick a lot of the low income folks out of Long Beach and into other cities, if not other states, because the rental market is just really bad right now, and it's only going to get worse. And so that's why we're also advocating, right, defunding the police to bring in a right to counsel program that also allows for tenants to have legal representation in court. And for that to happen, right, all we need is a 2% cut from the police budget. And we'll not only have a right to counsel program, but rental assistance as well for tenants in Long Beach. We're asking for the city to also make priority a housing division where tenants can go and ask for help from the city, not the community organizations, but have a city department that allows for tenants to get the help that they need. I'm pretty darn sure that a lot of the cases that end up in eviction wouldn't be ending up in eviction if we had a housing division. And if we had right to counsel, a lot of tenants that do end up going to eviction will have better chances of winning their case because a lot of the evictions that I've seen are BS. It's just greed, corporate greed. And I think that we have a good chance, as a community, as a city, to really step up and protect our most vulnerable residents. And that's it for me. I'm gonna keep it short and straight to the point. I do want to leave some space open for Kim as well. And so
Sorry, forgot to unmute. Yeah, thank you all for the rich conversation. I just want to remind folks, and thanks to all the folks listening in on Facebook Live, when we hear the word equity used a lot, right? All the city folks are using it, the school board's using it, and I really don't think they understand what that word means. It's the new buzzword from like multiculturalism or diversity, right? So the new buzzword is equity. And so I'm like, wait a minute, let's really understand what this means. And so in our equity profile of Long Beach, it defines equity as ensuring full inclusion of the entire city's residents in the economic, social, political life of the city, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their nativity, their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, their neighborhood of residence, or any other characteristics, right? These are essential elements to achieving economic inclusion. So I really, really encourage folks to use an intersectional lens when you're thinking about policies, or how to reopen schools, or how to hire people, how to, even like procurement, like everything, right? Like equity really means looking at it with a specific intentional lens. So we're not just looking at citizens, we're also looking at immigrants. We're not just looking at Black folks, we're also looking at Latinx folks. We're also looking at Asian communities. We're also looking at multiracial communities, right? And I know sometimes we get into some heated arguments between the Black and the Latinx community, and I feel like it's all planted, right? Because if we keep fighting with one another, we're gonna not think about the city budget. But haha, that's a trick. So, we're not fighting with Jessica. We're not fighting with James. We're not fighting with. We're all fighting with the city to do right by us, right? And to have an equity lens in all that they do. And so I think about yesterday's city council meeting, they approved $3 million for Central Cha to have a building, which is great. We want folks to own buildings in the city. And I compare that to the amount of work and labor and emotional labor that it took from listening sessions and data analysis and all of that with the reconciliation process for Black folks to be heard in the city to get the same $3 million, which is like, it's promised, it's not actually voted on yet, right? So you see like how those things are aligning, right? One is like the flick of a pen, and the other is like labors and labors of work, right? So that inherently builds some frustration in our communities. And I just want to encourage folks to keep doing the Black and Brown dialogue work. Like, we are not fighting against each other. We are fighting against the systems of injustice. We are fighting against the inequities that we see. We are fighting against the fact that if an organization gets money to do work for Black and Brown youth, we want to see development for Black and Brown youth, right? So we're fighting the systems, we are not fighting each other. So I just really want to make that clear, that it's important that we really understand what an equity lens is, and not just use the word as like the new hip phrase, trendy word, right? Like, we're having an equity lens. No, we're not, if we're not thinking about immigrants, if we're not thinking about Black folks, if we're not thinking about disabled students, right? Disabled kids in school. So I just really wanted to offer that to the conversation. I won't touch on reparations a lot because I know it's something that I'll touch on it briefly to say that that is something that cities across the country are recognizing, that it's important to, acknowledge. And I know, I think North Carolina so far, Asheville is leading in the city council voting on reparations for the city. And we hope that, Long Beach goes in that vein, right? You mentioned there's only 12% of us. 3 of my son's Black friends are already leaving because their parents didn't have jobs, and so they're leaving Long Beach. So the Black population is getting smaller and smaller. And I don't know, in some ways, I think maybe that's the plan all along, but the 12% of us are here to stay, and we really want to encourage the city to lean into ways that can make us feel included, make us feel heard, make us feel seen, and definitely moving towards reparations is one of the ways I think that would happen. I don't know if Don want to add anything else to that.
Sorry, muted. I thought you might have been touching on some of the demands. Do you want to touch on the demands at all? I'm asking because I just had them up, and then
Yeah, sure. I mean,
yeah.
there's basically 7 demands that we have of the city, right? I mean, that are integrated into this people's budget as well. Holding the city accountable is one, and we've been talking about that in many different ways. We've also been talking about the second demand of defunding the police, right, and police accountability. And if folks still have questions about how to defund the police and what that means, I think maybe you need to do a Google search, because we've been talking about it for months now, right? Really taking money away from the police and investing it back into the community. It's not rocket science. We're also wanting ways for the city to invest in education, right? We know that 21% of Black kids are passing math. We know that 31%, and I'm using the positives rather than the negatives, right? 30% are passing math. 30% are passing ELA, right? And So do the math, you see the percentage that are failing. So an investment in education is really at the core. And I know that fight is also with the school board, but there are things that the city can do. So I know oftentimes the city is like, oh, we don't have anything to do with education, but I beg to differ. Another demand is, really, as Beto was talking about, invest in housing, right? And houselessness. The most rent burdened folks in the city are Black women, particularly Black moms, right? I think we talked a little bit about investing. Another demand is investing in Black health. I know that $1 million did go to the health department to help with that. So we'll see what that looks like when the dust clears and how much of that really gets to the city. It was really, really heartbreaking to know that there's like fatherhood programs and infant mortality programs specifically for the Black community that none of us knew about, that have been in existence, some of them for 20 years. The other is in existence for 5 years. And the people on the ground have no idea. So the millions of dollars that the police do and use for PR, the health department, out of their 1 million, 3 million, whatever they have, aren't really able to share that with the public. And then another demand is investing in employment, right? We know that 40 million people are unemployed across the country. And so I don't know the exact percentage in Long Beach, but I know that it's high because almost everybody that we talk to is not working. And so really figuring out ways to invest in you and not just adults, but also youth, right? Youth coming out of high school also need jobs. And I know that organizations like Central Cha is also funded to help both Black and Brown youth, particularly around employment, so really stepping that up. And lastly, our last demand, our seventh demand, is really to invest in business and economic development. And so that looks like, whether it's however they want to close the wealth gap, they need to close the wealth gap, right? So supporting entrepreneurship, zero interest for lending, other resources that enhance and empower Black economic growth. The Black-owned businesses that are around are really struggling. And so again, using an equity lens to go to those businesses and say, what's the thing that would help you during this pandemic and during this time? Because we have to the whole point about equity is people get what they need. The 5 of us don't need the same things, right? We all have a different level of privilege amounts to 5 of us. So go to the businesses. There's only a few. I mean, there's maybe less than 10% of Black-owned businesses in Long Beach, if that. Check in with those folks, right? I know Rex runs the Economic Development Committee. Check in with those folks and see what they need, because we do need to empower Black economic growth in as much as possible. Thank you.
I guess that was rich and deep. Thank you, Kim. I guess I'll give just some real life grounding from all of that, experiential reflection for why all of this is critical. Like you mentioned, this reparations piece. There's a conference of mayors that mayors belong to, right, nationally, who have committed nationally to work on these reparations projects for Black people. And we've had 2 meetings with Robert Garcia, with our mayor, one around the forum, and then we had a follow-up while we were in the middle of this reconciliation process, not just BLM, but also with another approximately 40 other stakeholders who are just community folks who either are running businesses or just residents or other community work that they're doing. So this isn't just about BLM. Let me make this clear. It's 1:54, we're going till 2. I'm gonna try to keep this a little brief. James, feel free to give me the wrap up. Look, in the late 70s, under President Nixon, maybe even the president before him, started this attack, right, coming off of the civil rights movement, coming off of the Black Panther movement, they came up with this war on drugs. And during that period of time, there was an influx of systematically like infusing Black communities with crack that was extremely addictive. That like you think meth is addictive, you think us looking outside downtown at folks out here strung out on meth is something. Like the crack era was like, I feel like was 20 times. I was a kid during that time and watching our Black aunts and uncles and neighbors strung out on the streets who were like stealing VCRs to go and sell it. VCR, you guys remember that? Some of you might know what a VCR is, some of you might not.
I know what a VCR is.
Okay. Selling VC, like stealing, will break into someone's house just to get something to go sell it for a hit of crack because they've already been kicked out of their families because their families dismissed them and wrote them off. And now they're stuck, right? And so they're trying to survive. And so there was no Cheeto, I mean, number 45. I mean, there was no Trump, no president saying, hey, this is a health epidemic. Let's create rehabilitation centers, right? There was none of that. Instead, what happened was 3 strikes. Instead, what happened was mass incarceration. Instead, what happened was an opportunity for capitalists to make money on this harm that they inflicted on Black people through this war on drugs, through the infusion of crack in our Black communities, right? We saw battering rams, right, bursting down people's homes to come and find somebody to put them on a strike, to put them in prison, to make money on and gain free labor as we know exists under the Constitution 13. Why am I forgetting the number? It's 13, right? The 13th Amendment. Looking for the word amendment. That it still exists. Slavery still exists, right? As long as they can criminalize you, you're a slave in prison, right? So out come the war on drugs, you got mass incarceration, and then the school to prison pipeline, the disproportionate rates of discipline on, specifically on Black children, 5 times higher discipline rates on, okay, I see your note to wrap it up. This is what reparations is about. It's a restoration of this systematic harm in every system. We talk about redlining in the 6th district, like everything Kim just mentioned around housing to Black people is because we couldn't live anywhere else. This was up until just 1970. This is our generation. So I'll pause here. And so when people hear these terms, reparations, there is a project that our mayor has committed to, that Tom, our city manager, has said, yes, he is going to look at this reparations project with the mayor to look at exactly how systemic white supremacy in all of our systems has deeply and greatly impacted Black people right here in Long Beach. We're not talking about federal, we're talking about what our city can do, and look at how we then restore our Black communities who have been impacted by that historic systemic harm right here in this city. So I have enjoyed this conversation with you all. I know this isn't the last one, so I'll leave it there.
I'm gonna throw it out there, like People's Budget Marathon, like, you know, a 24-hour day kind of deal. People drop in, we just shoot the shit. It's gonna be great. So
hey, let me add really quick, on August 18th, want to invite people. We're doing the same. This will probably be more of a national conversation. There are Black Lives Matter chapters across the country who are also in the middle of these people's budgets. So August 18th, look for it. We'll also just be just right here on social media live.
I'm gonna wrap us up before we cut out, and Gabby's also gonna share do some interpretation for our Spanish speaking audience as well. But I just want to like thank you, Dawn, for like helping contextualize all of that too. And I think that's so vital because like I think it's, if I could speak to like, you know, all of the folks who are supporting like this movement that we're in, right? Defunding the police, the people's budget, all this stuff, it's gonna get hard. We're gonna have hard conversations, and there's going to be a lot of tricks, a lot of things thrown our way. And I think the way Kim put it earlier, right, about this, like people are, where there's gonna be a lot of this group against this group, these folks against these folks, and that is not it, right? And we're already seeing it, I mentioned earlier, from the POA. We're gonna hear it from others. We're gonna hear saying there's not enough money, right? And again, like we were saying before, to over at least $243 million just in the general fund alone from the police last year. A 10% cut just to that is $24 million. So we can't say that there's not enough money. That is just absolutely not true, right? And it's about us being able to understand and contextualize us within these systems, within these generations of systemic and historic structural racism, right? Where we're addressing these issues bit by bit, right? And we can't take it personally, right? And so I'm just so eternally grateful for all of you for sharing this conversation, that other folks got to watch this. If at any point this made you laugh, cry, feel some feels, like please share this so other folks can be in on this conversation as well. But I say all that too because when we think about what it's going to take to actually defund LBPD, pass this people's budget, right? It's going to take people having these hard conversations, doing this reflection work, right? But also showing up, right? We're doing our best to try and show up in this really difficult, and I'll say it, like these are barriers to democracy. The fact the way we're running these city council meetings right now, where people don't have accurate interpretation, right? Public comment is so tricky. We're limiting public comment in ways we've never done before. This is outrageous, right? And it really worries me for what it means for our community and for getting Black and brown voices in there as well. So I want to encourage you all. We're going to be sending out a lot more information, but also it's on the city website, all of the different community hearings, but particularly the budget oversight committee meetings and these budget hearings that will be happening at the city council. Encourage you all to sign up for public comment, encourage you to tune in and listen to these conversations, because we heard just last night at the first budget hearing, there are already council members saying, I don't support any cuts to the police, right? That flat out. And it's like, yo, read the room, but like that is where they're at, right? And so, and others on various different spectrums of that. So we are fooling ourselves. We don't think this is a fight, right? And that we have a lot of work to do. And I want to let people know more information coming, but this coming Tuesday, August 11th, 5 p.m., mark your calendars, send mail, whatever you have to do, is the next budget hearing at City Council. And it is the police budget, the police department budget. August 11th, Tuesday at 5 p.m. So I want to encourage you all as that agenda comes out, sign up for public comment if you feel really passionate about this and want to make that case, but also encourage you to participate in all of this. So really want to thank everybody and thank all of our roundtable here. Y'all give me life. I love doing this work alongside y'all and building with y'all. And I'm going to go cry after this because I got a lot of feelings. It's going to be great. Cry like good in a good way. But before we end, I want to turn over to Gabby just to, and just again, thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I have a few things, but yeah, Kim wanted to say something, so.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
You sure, Kim?
Yeah.
All right. So I just wanted to bring up also talk about what Kim said, right? That this is the moment to be in unity, to dismantle the same system that is really, really working against all of us. So this is a moment where like brown and Black communities can come together, right? And also want to acknowledge that the Latinx community also includes a lot of Black folks. So we cannot erase that. I'm going to switch to Spanish now. No tengo el talento de traducir todo lo que se acaba de decir el día de hoy. No podría, porque fue una conversación muy rica en lo que estábamos discutiendo, pero quiero darles nada más, porque no quiero que piensen que no estamos pensando en esto, ¿verdad? Que esto está en inglés, pero también es importante y vital que las comunidades que no hablan inglés estén involucradas en esto, más ahora que nunca, ¿verdad? Que se están habiendo muchas decisiones que se están discutiendo en el ayuntamiento, con los concejales y el alcalde. Ahorita precisamente estamos hablando del presupuesto de la ciudad, ¿verdad? Que todo este mes de agosto va a ser una discusión que va a pasar todos los martes y en otras juntas que también son parte del ayuntamiento, ¿verdad? Y tenemos que realmente enfocarnos en la clave que tenemos como comunidad unida de quitar fondos a la policía, desembolsar a la policía, invertir en los programas de las comunidades, ¿verdad? Invertir en el presupuesto del pueblo, que es lo que estamos hablando el día de hoy, ¿verdad? Sabemos que el alcalde y el city manager también ya pudieron dar su presupuesto, que ellos quieren que el concilio, los demás concejales aprueben y voten en eso. Ahora es el momento de que nosotros podemos hablar y realmente hacer que nuestras voces sean escuchadas, porque ahorita es el momento de que estemos en unidad, ¿verdad? Con la comunidad negra y la comunidad latina, aunque sabemos que comunidad latina también incluye a gente negra, ¿verdad? Ahora es el momento de estar juntos y pelear en esta batalla porque es el mismo sistema que nos está oprimiendo a todos nosotros. Y realmente lo que estamos pidiendo con el presupuesto del pueblo son cosas básicas, ¿verdad? Y no tengo que explicarles a ustedes porque eso es su vida, ¿verdad? Y creo que la diferencia es de que la realidad de las personas que están haciendo la situación no es la misma realidad de la de nosotras. Y es donde está ahí lo que está, no está en acuerdo, ¿verdad? No está en acuerdo. Entonces, los invito a todos que sigamos siendo parte de estas conversaciones para poder realmente desembolsar a la policía, o quitar dinero de lo que realmente es un sistema muy violento e invertir en todos nosotros, sea el acceso a la lengua, sea el fondo de justicia para representar a personas que están en procedimientos de deportación aquí en Long Beach, sea invertir en las comunidades negras, sea invertir en que haya un abogado que pueda representar a gente que estén en procedimiento de evicción, que sabemos que muchos de nosotros estamos en eso ahorita, ¿verdad? De que ahorita no hay trabajo y de todos modos nos están pidiendo que paguemos una renta que no podemos pagar. Entonces, y más, son muchísimas más cosas que quisiera compartir, ¿verdad? Pero creo que eso es lo clave y también lo que es importante es de que realmente nos mantengamos unidos, ¿verdad? Y que no nos peleemos uno a los otros, sino más bien que peleemos otra vez al sistema más grande, que es el que realmente es la gran batalla. Y sabemos que esto es complejo, ¿verdad? Que no se va a entender en un minuto ni en 5 minutos, pero es una conversación de que tal vez tendremos que tener por meses y hasta años. Pero este es el comienzo. Así que espero que esto sea como algo breve que les pueda haber comunicado, ¿verdad? Vamos a seguir otra vez, como les digo, hablando de esto, pero es importante de que mencionemos que hay unidad, ¿verdad? Y por eso estamos trabajando juntos. Gracias a Donnie y a Kim por estar aquí y por compartir este espacio y poder hablar de lo que realmente es la prioridad de la comunidad. Gracias. That's it. I couldn't translate everything, but as much as I could.
Thank you everyone for joining us and tuning in, and we will see you very soon, hopefully Tuesday night.